I don't know. Say it with me. I don't know. Good God, it is liberating. I am a towering mountain of ignorance. I don't know. We're taught to believe that everything has a reason. Now, I'm glad that we have the desire to understand the world. That results in all sorts of great stuff. We want to know everything. We're humans. We're curious. And maybe it's our culture. Maybe it's just humanity. But I think a lot of the time we end up mixing up thinking something with knowing something. Suddenly, I know that I don't know. But somehow everyone else seems to know. They all know differently from each other, but they all seem to know. What I'm saying is nobody's opinions are correct in the world. And yet it's impossible not to tie your opinions to your concept of self. And often people tie those things so closely together that they begin defending their guesses as if they're defending their very lives. In a way, they are. This is why it can be so impossible to talk about certain topics with certain people. They've tied those suppositions to themselves so tightly with knots of narrative and constructed reality and values that there's just no untying it. And maybe unsurprisingly, in those situations, the best course of action is just to be friends. The world as we perceive it, as we've built it inside of ourselves, is a lie that we tell to ourselves, not out of deception, but out of necessity. We simply cannot understand the world as it is, and so we construct. But sometimes I just have to tell myself the thing that is definitely true, the truest thing I can say, which is that I don't know.
Never know.
This is the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast with Bob Pondillo and Cass Midgley.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 177 of the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. Today, Dr. Bob Pondillo and I talk with Jeff Haley and Dale McGowan, authors of Sharing Reality: How to Bring Secularism and Science to an Evolving Religious World. Jeff Haley is a scientist, lawyer, and inventor. He has argued before the U.S. Supreme Court and founded and directed the nonprofit that led Washington State's successful medical marijuana initiative. He is currently the founder and CEO of OraHealth, which sells his patented healthcare products through 30,000 pharmacies worldwide. Dale McGowan is the author and editor of numerous books, including Parenting Beyond Belief, In Faith and in Doubt, and Atheism for Dummies. In 2008, he was named Harvard Humanist of the Year for his work in nonreligious parent education. Religions are a natural outgrowth of the intuitive ways of knowing that evolved with human culture. Though many people continue to find value in religious identity and community, intuitive knowledge has been eclipsed by a more effective way of knowing, the scientific way. A better way of relating religion to politics, called secularism, is gradually replacing theocracy. Once you understand and accept the scientific way of knowing, and this preferred relationship of church and state, you become agnostic and secular, even if you continue to identify with and participate in religion. As Jeff and Dale both argue, this isn't some abstract dream. It's happening right now. Religions are in a continuous state of evolution, changing beliefs, values, and practices over time. All religions, including Christianity and Islam, can evolve to accept the scientific way of knowing, and secularism, becoming agnostic and even atheistic without losing their essential value. Jeff and Dale explain how we can help this natural process, sharing reality with your friends and family in a way that encourages religions to embrace the best of humanity's knowledge and values. The only way I celebrate anyone's faith is if it's light and loose and full of doubt and uncertainty and love and connectedness and empathy. And I only do that because in this chapter of human history, it's the best thing I can do to further the demise of all nonsense forged out of fear, childishness, death anxiety, and the need for extant meaning, aka religions. See, if there is a God or something of the sort, no human should ever bow the knee to it, nor would a good God want that. The best practice of ethics, morals, virtue, etc., is to ignore God and attend to reality, your neighbors, problem solving, conflict resolution, all the stuff that plagues us and makes life difficult. The day we stop looking to the heavens to fix us or save us or to create a new place for us to exit this mess is the day that we put on our big person pants, roll up our sleeves, and get busy living and loving the facts, what it means to be human, and the honest resolution of real problems. All notions that take our eyes off reality and onto untruths contribute to our problems, not solve them. And for those too imprinted with religion to embrace that, consider this. After we forsake God and actually love one another and fix things, any God worth his or her salt will say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Because if his or her ego is too fragile to share the glory, then fuck him. Now, I also want to say something about pedagogy. Pedagogy simply means the function or work of a teacher. Now, nobody likes a smarty pants, but let's ask ourselves why. It could be argued that often the reason people don't like people who know something they don't and want to pass it on is their own insecurity or jealousy, which are not virtues, I feel it must be said. On the other hand, when the student is ready, the teacher arrives, which implies that, like what Jesus said, trying to teach someone unsolicited advice can backfire. It also has the potential of cutting into that person's freedom to figure it out for themselves, which we all know, knowledge that's hard-earned and self-determined always has a more indelible and lasting effect on the learner. It's odd, isn't it? My therapist is a wise old sage who's extremely skilled and self-disciplined in not giving me the answers to my problems. He knows the value of me figuring it out for myself. He's told me that client after client has begged him, "Tell me what to do." And in his wisdom, he won't. And yet, our schools are filled with teachers telling kids what they don't want to hear. What's the balance? You know the phrase, "You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink"? Often we focus on the "can't make them drink" part. But think about the first part. We can lead people to water, and sometimes we should. It goes back to what Jesus said, doesn't it? We should assess the person we're engaged with, whether they seem to be a candidate for the truth we could endow in that moment. Otherwise, we're being presumptuous, are we not? For those of us who love to set people free with truth, for those of us whose lives have benefited so greatly from the truth we've discovered that we want to share it with them, for those of us who see our loved ones sabotaging their own lives by believing lies, we owe it to ourselves and everyone in our lives to exercise some age-old wisdom and self-control and truly discern the moment, whether it's pregnant with pedagogical possibility or that person will only resent the impartation and experience it as condescending. It will be lost on them, and it will backfire. Often they will double down on their self-deception just to spite you. Similarly, our guests today, Jeff and Dale, have taken a high road when it comes to the religious hegemonic stronghold that Christianity has over America. Instead of the firebrand atheism, which has its own place, they've chosen to play nice with their fellow Americans who identify as Christian. They, like the mission of this podcast, seek to oil the wheels of the natural evolution of religious culture and the slow, gentle deconstruction that truth will inevitably have on untruth. We taped this conversation on October 21st, 2017. We interview people you don't know about a subject no one wants to talk about. We hope to encourage people in the process of deconstructing their faith and help curb the loneliness that accompanies it. We think the world's a better place when more people live by sight, not by faith. Subscribe to our podcast or leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, you can support us monetarily in two easy ways. You can pledge $1 per episode or more through Patreon. That's patreon.com/EA podcast. Or you can leave a lump sum donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. The smallest contribution is greatly appreciated. Our opening monologue is an excerpt from a YouTube by Hank Green titled Towering Mountain of Ignorance. The music behind it is Never Know by Jack Johnson. The segue music on this episode was recorded by Sam Mayer on a handpan in the New York City subway. Thank you for listening, and be a yes-sayer to what is. So our guests today are Jeff Haley and Dale McGowan. Is it McGowan or McGowan?
McGowan,
Yeah.
short. Yeah.
You got a new book out called Sharing Reality, How to Bring Secularism and Science into an Evolving Religious World. Mm-hmm. And we want to talk about that. But the nature of our show is that I'm a lifelong Christian that deconverted to an atheist. Bob's a lifelong atheist. And we interview people who have deconstructed their childhood faith. And we put that out every week because there's people all over the United States and the world, for that matter. We've got listeners all over that have deconverted, and it's a very traumatic experience. And a lot of times they find themselves alone. They can't share it with people. And so we kind of curb the loneliness of the deconversion experience. So, Mike, before we get into the book and what you guys do for, the different works that you're doing, did either of you have a childhood faith that you deconstructed?
Dale, why don't you go first?
I usually characterize my childhood as sort of nominally Christian family. We went to church every Sunday most of the time I was growing up, but it was a very progressive Christian denomination, no hellfire and brimstone, and it didn't really leak into the rest of the week. It was just the typical thing that church leaders complain about. So on Sunday. We're there on Sunday, but it didn't really affect the rest of the week. And my parents didn't push it on us particularly. So I had a religious exposure, but also a lot of space around me so that I could sort of think and make my own conclusions.
Was this sort of like Presbyterianism or something like that?
It was UCC.
Okay. Oh, it's very
United
progressive.
Church of Christ.
Oh, sure. United Church of Christ. Yes.
That's about as progressive as it gets. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. It almost falls off the edge of the table at that point.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, I think knowing what I know about the trauma of people who are still haunted by, say, the concept of hell or something, you didn't have any of that baggage. So congratulations.
Oh, yeah, none of that. Thank you.
What about you, Jeff?
So, Dale, at 12 years old, did you believe or not?
Oh, I don't ever remember myself being a conventional believer. Uh-huh. I don't know that I had actively rejected anything. I certainly hadn't called myself an atheist or anything like that. But I can't remember a time when I was really a conventional believer.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Absolutely. No, I get that.
So you didn't have a personal relationship with God. That's what it sounds like.
No, we just hung out on the internet.
You and God. Yeah, I get you.
So, Jeff, did you believe at 12?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
My background is pretty much the same as Dale's. That is, my parents thought for cultural exposure education, I ought to go to a church and go to a Sunday school. But if I didn't believe any of it, that was fine with them.
Okay.
What denomination would that be then, Jeff?
It was Northern Presbyterian.
Yeah.
My parents said, anytime you want to go to the Unitarian Church instead, that's fine with us.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's pretty liberal stuff then.
Yeah.
A Northern Presbyterian. I guess there are Presbyterians in the South, huh? It might
Sure.
be,
I grew up Presbyterian in Oklahoma. Yeah.
So, and that was a lot more strict?
No. It was liberal.
My recollection is that the church split in the Civil War.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so we're Americans, so none of us escaped Christian hegemony, but at least it didn't invade either of your hearts, and that's a good thing. You got away, escaped.
I described my path a little more completely as becoming very anti-religious at one point, and then swinging back toward being pro-religious now, while being evidenced an atheist.
Okay, so let's talk about that because, I know for me, when I when I deconverted, I did come out of the gates angry and ashamed that I ever believed this stuff, because I was a pastor. I was just lock, stock, and barrel. I mean, Jesus was my best friend. In fact, Jesus was my husband. That's actually the metaphor in the Bible, is that I'm the bride of Christ, and that, all of that. So I had a 39-year love affair with Jesus, and it was a traumatic divorce. And so I came out swinging, I came out mad. And so, Jeff, you had a period where you were, pushing back, and now you sound like you play nice with religion. What changed?
9/11 and the intellectual books that followed it by Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens made me rather anti-religious and thinking that, we need to fight back against it. Yeah. But then I gave it a lot more thought, concluded that religion, depending on how you define it, can be good for people and good for society, and we are animals that need social organizations. And if the ones that are called religious are the ones that help people develop values, morals, ethics, and that's a good thing. They just need to stay away from facts.
Okay. Well, I was listening to an interview this week, and, I forget the guy's name, but he's basically the Egyptian Jon Stewart. Like, he did a daily show in Egypt, and, he pushed back against politics and everything. And he made a statement yesterday that, when I was listening, that made sense. And he said, both of the texts of Islam and Christianity have horrible things to say about women and have horrible treatment of homosexuals or whatever. And just in general, there's some brutal shit in both of those books. However, what changed in America versus, the Middle East or something is the culture. So these religions are both like dogmatic in some really archaic and brutal ways. But the reason that Christians don't actually stone, gays, whereas is the culture changed. And it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like that's kind of the book is about evolving religion's world, so you're cheering on the evolution of culture, and in a way that they can still carry their religion in their pocket or whatever, because we're meaning-making creatures, and we're probably always going to, have things that we've compartmentalized outside of reason and logic, and that's okay. I'm putting words in your mouth. Maybe you can explain what your agenda is with the book.
Yes, I think what you've said is fully compatible with our views.
Okay.
All right.
So unpack it for me.
First, I would fill in a little bit of the thread that you started there about the culture changing. One of the assumptions of the book, and one of our observations, is that religion changes more slowly than religious people do.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If you Google what do Catholics believe, for example, you're going to get the Catechism of the Catholic Church. You're going to get a set of doctrines that has changed very, very little over the years. Right. And saying that is a representation of what Catholics believe turns out to be way off the mark when you actually start talking to, especially American Catholics, a lot of European Catholics as well, but American Catholics, on point after point after point, they are in sometimes polar opposition to the assumptions of the Catechism. Mm-hmm. And something like, the Catechism says that birth control is intrinsically evil. And yet 86% of American Catholics support birth control. A majority support abortion rights. A higher percentage of Catholics support gay marriage than the general population. I mean, even people who are in a church that has a very specifically says that homosexuality is a grave disorder that should never be approved. And yet they are at higher percentages than the American population. So that's just Catholicism. We could do the same thing with church after church in the United States. Yeah. And you see that the people, including people who are very religious, who consider religion to be a major part of their lives, right, who pray every day, who go to church every week, have views that have very little correlation to the doctrines of their churches. Yeah. So one of the things that we wanted to do in the book is to underline that and to note that there are a lot of views and values that are actually shared between the non-religious and people who are going to church every Sunday.
Sure. But why if there's this disconnect or dissonance, why do they stay? Is it just all community? They just need society. They need a social outlet or something. I mean, if they don't believe the dogma, why stay?
Well, that's really one of the most interesting questions. Jeff, you want to start with that?
I don't know if that's the only reason they stay, but I do think that's a very important reason. People need community. They need to share thoughts and ideas with others. We are social animals.
Right.
And if you tell them you can't have this group because you don't have the right thoughts, then they need another group. Well, we don't have to kill all religions and start new groups. We can evolve the existing religions to focus on values and morals and ethics and meaning in life, and just get rid of the nonsense assertions of fact that they've been making and adjust their factual assertions to be consistent with what we've learned through science.
And part of what makes that possible is the fact that just what you said, religion is becoming more and more about something other than those beliefs. Yeah. It's becoming a social network, a social community. There was a really terrific study done in 2010, I think it was. Researchers at Harvard and the University of Wisconsin looked at the old, pretty well-established fact that churchgoers, they rank higher in life satisfaction measures. You know, they are generally happier than non-churchgoers. But they drilled down on that data more. They found a much more complex set of relationships here. Churchgoers who have a number of close friends in the congregation are the ones who are highest in life satisfaction. Yeah. Next in the ranking are non-churchgoers. And at the bottom, the lowest ranking in life satisfaction are churchgoers who have no friends in the congregation. So, and you can see that when you go to church every Sunday and you see other people engaging in this social network and connecting with each other and asking, how's your health? How's your back? How's your family doing? And then there you sit, not making that connection. You might as well be at home. I mean, you're going to be more satisfied with your life if you're not being confronted with that all the time. Yeah. So this is one of the many studies that's now underlining the fact that religion has become about something different. It means something different from what it used to mean to be religious in America today.
Yeah. Is that why you think there's such pushback against humanism, atheism, those kind of things? Because now we're seeing that happen in the culture. Or am I off base on that? Are there studies or numbers that suggest otherwise?
It depends on who you're talking to. If you're talking to leaders in the churches, that's different from people in the churches. The leaders are finally recognizing that they're in free fall. It took a long time for there to be sort of these forthright, honest statements that we are losing people and it's not going to end. It's not going to stop. 3 million people fewer every year are in the churches. I mean, that's an absolutely astonishing bleed. So there's sort of a reflexive desire to look outside for the cause, to say, well, it's the atheists degrading the culture. It's the secular humanists who are taking all values out of just nonsensical stuff. But it's not getting the same purchase. It's not getting the same toehold that it used to get with their actual members. They're not people saying, oh gosh, you're right, I'm going to stay. And it's especially true of younger people, of millennials, of the generation that's upcoming. They simply do not buy these externalizations of blame. They are putting the blame right where it belongs with a lot of the doctrines that are being held on to by the leadership.
So your sort of thesis or observation is, well, then let's go with that. Let's use the evolving religious world and and kind of work with it, let the culture percolate and change and what have you, and people will change along with it. So what's wrong with that? Not completely.
Not just let it change, but help it change.
Yeah, all the wheels of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Look at the direction that the change has to go, and talk about it using terminology and making people familiar with ways of talking and thinking about it that help the people and the organizations evolve in the direction they need to be going.
Right. Because there's a train wreck coming. I mean, it seems like, with the leaders and their dogma and the people with their more liberal thinking, what the hell's what's going to happen here? Something's got to give, as they say.
I would say if you look back at history, we will predict that there won't be a train wreck. There'll just be continued evolution. of each of the churches. They've all been evolving since the beginning of humanity.
Right. Even though in their holy books and in their dogmas and beliefs and stuff, this is diametrically opposed to some of the stuff that's happening.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think one of the pieces of evidence that this evolution is happening is look at the mega churches. You know, there are some mega churches that are dogmatic and doctrinaire, but a lot of the biggest and most successful, look at Joel Osteen, for example.
Yeah.
But the thing that drives the Orthodox bananas about Joel Osteen is that look at his stage. He doesn't have a cross on the stage. He's got the big whirling globe, right?
Yeah.
And when you hear his sermons, he's talking about self-help, self-improvement, connection to others, service to others.
It's the power of positive thinking, really.
Exactly, right.
Yeah,
it's all this very, essentially humanistic stuff. And you can go from one church to the next. You can't even find the denomination name in a lot of these churches anymore. It's something like Saddleback Community Church, right? That's actually a recognition by some of the leadership about what's actually going on in their churches and what it is that the people need and what they're getting out of it. They're getting this social connection out of it, and they're actually driven away by a lot of the dogma. So you've got some who are still pursuing the dogma, but an awful lot of others who are following the evolution of the church.
Well, and I think, and I'm going back to Jeff's point, when 9/11 was a pivotal time for me. I was an evangelical pastor at the time, and I was a radical. I had T-shirts made up of like whatever it takes and populate heaven, and I was evangelistic, and I really wanted to turn my city upside down for Jesus. And I saw in those guys that flew those planes, I saw faith and devotion that made mine look like a pussy. And I thought, wow, is this where this is heading? You know, that you'll literally do something because God told you to, in the face of logic and reason that that you would never do in any other context. And so I saw a very toxic and scary version of fundamentalism, and it reflected back to me like a mirror. Wow. And so I began to backpedal. And I think what I hear you guys saying, and especially with I follow a guy on Twitter named Christopher Stroop, and he started a hashtag empty the pews. And so all his tweets are about, examples of churches just doing really horrific things, or at least proposing or purporting anti-climate change or denial of science and or anti-LGBT rights or whatever. And let me ask both of you, maybe one at a time. I'll start with you, Dale. I mean, this part of what we're seeing is that when regular people who have their own personal convictions, like they may have a gay friend, and then the church they're attending starts bashing that lifestyle,
or a gay son, even.
Then I mean, are these some of the things that are people are backpedaling from their faiths, or what are you guys seeing?
Oh, I think there's no doubt about it, especially statistically, again, the millennials, the doctrines in opposition to gay rights, in opposition to homosexuality generally, those are always at the top for things that are driving young people away from the churches. It simply makes no sense to them, in terms of the more progressive social ideology and the fact that they, like you said, they know people who are gay. They know people of other religions, people of other races. This was a couple of generations ago. It was possible to grow up in a neighborhood in which everybody in your neighborhood was the same religion, the same race, same socioeconomic status. That's much less common now.
Yeah, but isn't that the Make America Great Again agenda? I mean, like that's what people. Some people want to go back to that.
Go straight back to that. That's the idea. But you can't put this genie back in the bottle because it's happened not out of any intention, but out of American mobility.
Yeah.
In the 50s, it was common to move once or twice in your lifetime. You leave the house that you grew up in, you move one or two more times, and it's typically in the same area. You're still surrounded by people who are very much like you. Currently, Americans move 11.7 times in their lifetime.
Wow.
And they're moving hundreds or thousands of miles. They're crossing socioeconomic and racial and religious boundaries, working with people who are from diverse backgrounds. Once you're doing that and you're actually, someone who's Muslim, someone who is gay, and then you go to church and they're painting this caricature, of people that you know, it no longer makes sense. So you have a choice. Basically the people have the choice to stay or leave, but also the churches have the choice of continuing to beat that horse or to evolve with the people.
Okay,
and the most successful ones are doing that.
But these flyover states where they literally don't move once, let alone 11.7 times, this is the Trump voter base. I mean, this is the people that are. I mean, we're acknowledging that when you get out of the house a little more, or you go to another country, you get some culture, your religion's going to disintegrate, especially the more exclusive it is and the more fundamentalist it is. It's going to disintegrate because you see all these Chinese people and you realize they're all going to hell, and that's just going to create a cognitive dissonance that no one can sleep with. Right. But these are people that don't get out of the house. They don't get out of their zip code. And so I guess this evolution that we're experiencing aren't we really talking about cosmopolitan people and metro people? I don't think it's evolving very fast in the flyover states.
Well, one of the things I think that is important in that is to think about the purple map. If you've seen the
yeah, I've seen that. Yeah,
and the fact that there are gradations in every. I live in Georgia. Georgia's a red state.
Yeah.
But Georgia's also a state that Barack Obama lost by something like 2 or 3 points. So when you look at a red state, every state is purple. They are just purple in different gradations. Definitely true that in the cities and the urban areas it's going to be more progressive, but there is more of a mix, including in those flyover states.
Yeah.
Than there once was.
Well, I think the vote is a reflection of gerrymandering, not necessarily the real demographic. I think.
The combination of gerrymandering and the Electoral College, because the Electoral College favors those rural states. There's all sorts of structural stuff that's sort of keeping the head above water of that worldview. But it's fighting against some really powerful demographics.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to revel in this moment because I'm serious. I just got a little high because what we just unpacked reveals that America is not as fucked up as I think. So I'm going to revel in that for a second.
Yeah.
A purpose of our book is to help this process.
Yeah.
Define some terminology, to give people some mental thinking tools, to help them lead their friends toward evolving their friends' religious views in a helpful direction. For example, one of them that I see people stumbling over all the time is the separation of facts and values. I was just reading a critique online where it said, well, the truth that all people are created equal, but science can't give us that, and therefore I don't accept science. Well, that's not a fact. It's a value. Yeah. Science only gives us the facts. It doesn't give us any of the values. The values are hard and important, but you can't get them from science.
Sure.
And so to reject science just because it doesn't give you that value doesn't make any sense at all. All you need to do is keep the two separate, and then you don't have this trouble.
Yeah, the book Sharing Reality, How to Bring Secularism and Science into an Evolving Religious World by our guests, Jeff and Dale. And it's a little tome. It's only 166 pages. So it's you can read it, and you can read it quickly, and you can get something out of it. I used to teach college guys, and I at a Southern university here in town, and I was often struck with. These were good kids. Ignorant, not stupid, and they would, my thought was, well, they just don't understand how science works, and that's what I've got to try to explain to them, about the notion of peer review and the notion of how specifically ideas and information is looked at, and how I think you call it the spun gold of science in one of the lines in your book. How difficult it is for something to become a fact, and even that has an
uncertainty.
Yes, there's an uncertainty about what percentage are you at 100% certainty or 99% certainty or 50% certainty, and all those things are very nuanced. And how in the South do you get that information to pretty bright kids that are just drenched in this religious belief, in these religious beliefs they have? It's,
I think it is hard.
It's missionary work.
It's a matter of, missionary work. Education is the key. Once people really understand the scientific way of knowing, they cross a bright line, and then they get it, and they don't ever slip back.
Right.
But their children need to be educated the same way, because it's not natural for people to understand this way of knowing.
Yeah, and you make that clear in your book, too. It is very strange, very counterintuitive to understand the scientific method. It doesn't seem to make sense to people for some reason, but after you look at it, it makes loads of sense.
Right, and I think there are two elements that can be helpful with these. You're talking about these religious kids. One of them is that we try to underline in the book is to recognize that it is not incompatible to be religious and to recognize the value of science. So if you can start with that and recognize that there are religious people, there are religious perspectives that entirely embrace science. This is not a choice between God and science. If you set the choice up in that way, you're doomed. For a lot of people.
Right.
And then the other aspect is recognizing the value of science. Essentially, why is it worth pursuing scientific knowledge? Why is it beneficial to you to have that knowledge? What is it that it does for you? And we have several examples from specifically medical, looking at measles outbreaks, looking at cholera and so on.
Right.
The idea of taking this way of interrogating reality, of interrogating the universe that's outside of our tribal perspectives, and saying we're going to try to find out what's true in all these different areas, and then look at the benefits that flow back to all of us from that. I think that's the sort of two-pronged, recognizing that it's not inherently in conflict with being religious, and then recognizing the very specific benefits that come from a scientific worldview, that it's not just a nice thing to know the truth. It actually makes life better. Mm-hmm. And once people can start to see that with specific examples, it can really take off.
Yeah, I get you.
I mean, I feel like we're almost stating the obvious. I feel like that we're also observing something that we're kind of acknowledging. And on one hand, education doesn't change people's beliefs that they didn't. What's the phrase in a nutshell? You can't take a belief away from somebody by way of logic and reason that they did not obtain by way of logic and reason.
Yeah.
So I started this show. I mean, one of the things that I say is that I am trying to oil the wheels of deconversion that is naturally taking place. I want it to speed up. And I feel like that you guys are doing the same with this book.
An observation on this topic is that the word religion, people need to understand it as being broader than many have defined the term in the past. People in the past have often defined religion on the basis of what facts each different religion believes. Well, if you stop defining it based on what facts people believe and instead define it on what values they hold, and let religions be broad enough that they aren't confined to certain assertions of fact, then it gives people space to have their religions evolve. It gives space for religions themselves to evolve.
What an interesting idea. Something in the future where a priest or a pastor or somebody would stand before a congregation and say, there was a time in our religion where we believed in the virgin birth. We know that's just ridiculous. There was a time when, and then they just sort of deconstruct all the stuff that people question and say, but those were the myths of our past. And now we're in this new place and let's all love each other or something. I don't know what they're going to do.
I've heard that sermon. That's
really?
Actually, I've heard it at UU's and I've heard it at in secular humanistic Judaism. Mm-hmm. That these are religious organizations, religious communities that are fully embracing exactly that, a recognition of the mythic past and the way it has been valuable to us, but also that we can still come together, we can still be in community and still do good things together and urge each other to the highest aspirations of our worldview without holding on to those myths. Mm-hmm. So, that's out there.
Well, that's a great thing. I don't think the Southern Baptists are going to be doing that soon, though, but that's...
Let me disagree.
Yes,
Let me assert
please do.
That they have already done that, Not that I have any expertise in that particular religion or any religion, but for example, the Catholics once insisted that the earth was the center of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't insist that anymore.
Yep.
Now, it took a long time, but they did change. Now, in 2012, I read that the Catholic top of the hierarchy said hell does not literally exist. That's a change.
Boy, I'll say.
They used to say that it literally exists.
Mm-hmm.
And so even the Catholics, even at the most conservative aspect, they're changing. It's a slow process, but we need to help it move along.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the Southern Baptists had beliefs in the past that they don't have today.
Yeah. Well,
probably.
I don't know what they are. Maybe about the sun, maybe about hell, maybe
about slavery even. You know, I think they've kind of backpedaled on that.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
A little bit.
Slavery is all about values. There's no scientific facts in the subject of slavery. Mm-hmm. And for them to change their values, fine. That didn't require them changing the facts. But if they thought their slavery was based on facts of technical difference from one group of people to another, then maybe their realization that their facts were wrong about that helps them change their values.
Right.
So it sounds like to me, Jeff, that you went from like right after 9/11, like wagging the finger at religion, maybe shouting them down, calling them stupid or whatever, and I'm just saying this metaphorically. And now you've kind of come over and put your arm around them, and you're befriending them and saying, "Hey, let's walk in this direction a little bit."
Yes. And let me help you by expanding the definition of the word religion to include any organization that wants to call itself religious can do so. Yeah. And no one else can say, no, you're not a religion.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of the author David Dark?
I have not.
He's a regional author here. Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay. I was just on a limb there. But he wrote a book called Life's Too Short to Pretend You're Not Religious, and it very much expands what the word religion encompasses.
Mm-hmm. As we expand the definition of the word religion, a lot of the atheist authors need to accept that expansion as well, because they often attack all religions. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, you can't attack all religions on these grounds. You have to attack most religions, because there are now religions that fully accept all of the scientific facts, all of the scientific way of knowing, and they just focus on values.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Sam Harris would be kind of out of business, wouldn't he? Because he pushes hard. He pushes hard against religious dogma, and you're suggesting that there's, some churches don't behave that way.
It's not a big change required in Sam's language. He just needs to put the words some or most in front of religion when he uses it.
Yeah.
And then it's still true.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of broad brushing all the time. So I think maybe I want to pose this in wrapping up. The question for my listeners maybe is that a lot of my listeners have a lot of tension in their hearts and minds around their past dogmatic lifestyle, and now they've departed, and yet they have parents, siblings, friends that are still in that. And in my case, I had friends that basically stopped talking to me. I have family that are very, very disappointed in me, and it causes a lot of tension. And might somebody who has deconverted and is in that place where there's a lot of tension in their relationships around this subject, might they benefit from reading this book as far as helping them have some tools in order to play well with others?
Yes, I think that's very much one of the main intentions of the book. Because it's not a book that is trying to teach someone to persuade others to switch teams. Mm-hmm. That's not what it's actually doing. It's giving tools to open conversations to recognize shared values that are already there. Keep your religious identity, keep going to church on Sunday. I'm not trying to take that from you. Mm-hmm. What I'd like to do is recognize that when it comes to values, which are the things that, beliefs can actually be relatively trivial. They are opinions of fact. I think that God exists. I think that we go to heaven or hell after we die. You can actually get along fine with somebody who differs with you in those beliefs. It's values that really link us together or divide us. If I were to find out that somebody believes that, in the racial inferiority of blacks as a value statement, that's going to be a person I have a great deal more difficulty living with and accepting than somebody who has a different opinion about God, about that relative abstraction. Mm-hmm. So the book is intended to help recognize that beliefs, the relative trivia of beliefs, can differ. Mm-hmm. The shared values that have been evolving between religious and non-religious perspectives and between religions, that's the grounds on which we can actually move forward. We can address the kind of things that are important to all of us, socially and otherwise. And that the book gives examples of how to do that, how to not do that, and why it's important.
Cool.
On the use of the word beliefs, people use the word beliefs to refer to facts and to refer to values.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I believe that all humans are created equal. Well, that's a value that says I want them to be treated in equal ways. That's not a fact. Mm-hmm. I believe my friend was murdered. Well, there's a little bit of fact in there. Somebody died, but But when you say the word murdered, that means that certain values were violated by someone in your assertion. Fact is that. And so when people use the word belief, they often get confused, and they often mix facts and values together. Yeah. Without realizing it.
Yeah, I'm a former guest on the show, Jeff Bates, and wrote the book Little Bucket and other things. Yeah. He came, well, I think the last time he was on the show, he just said something about the meaninglessness of that word. I mean, it really just, it is kind of, it's really bland. And because you can say, I think, I mean, that's, I think, the direction that he was wanting to take it is like, I'd rather people start using the word I think or I value, like you're saying this. It's a weird phenomenon.
Guys, is it is our generation just lost? I mean, me and Cass and the rest of us. I mean, forget us. We're on the way out. So the new group that's coming up will, there will be an evolution and good things ahead. Is that a good? What do you think about that?
Oh, I think it varies a lot. It's very clear in the stats that our generations have been less likely to accept these values that we're talking about, less likely to have scientific worldview and so on. But it varies. I mean, there's like you said, the urban versus rural. There are all sorts of splits that have made it possible for a lot of people in our generation to see it. One of the things that I think is compelling is just that some people are seeing it, if nothing else, out of a pragmatic position when we see this wave coming behind us, this absolute wave of secularism and humanistic, and even among young people who are religious. And this is one of the most important points that I try to keep driving home, which is that when you drill down and talk to people about their values and all these things that we've been talking about, even if they are continuing to identify as religious, that means something dramatically different from what it has meant for our generation. And that's the thing that I think a lot of us look back and just accept. Even if it's just pragmatic, we say, okay, things cannot continue as they have been because the young people are simply going to swamp our boat and change the world.
Well, the evangelicals have always been sort of one step ahead, though. They've realized that the kids are hemorrhaging kids and what have you, so they go with heavy metal Christian music and they go with rap Christian music, and they're trying to suck the kids back in with culture. Only it's kind of culture.
Yeah, and see what all those things you mentioned are social. Yeah. What they're doing is sucking them in with community, and let them do that. If they're going to do that and the kids come in, but they do not absorb those reactionary dogmas, that's fine. And that's what's happening. You've got a lot of kids, and there are exceptions. There are some that are absorbing the dogmas, but an awful lot of these young evangelical kids are in the church, of the church, accepting the label and not accepting the really toxic dogmas. And I just say, fine, if that's evolution, that's the evolution of the church. And if they're going to do that in a way that that doesn't bring the toxins along with it, that's just fine.
Yeah.
Well, let me. Usually we end up with some side questions, some lighthearted stuff. But I want to. I've in reading both of your bios, you each have a project that I kind of want to pull from. So, Jeff, you are founder, co-sponsor, chair of Washington's successful medical marijuana initiative campaign.
Washington State. Yeah.
So talk about your work there and what your passions around that subject.
Well, all my life I have wanted to spend a certain amount of my time and energy trying to help society improve one way or another. And I've had different projects at different times.
I notice you have several patents.
Yes. I've filed more than 60 patent applications on my inventions, and some of them have turned out to be valuable inventions. But in addition to the inventing, which I see as merely business, I've also been working for social justice in one way or another on different projects at different times. I was once a member of Business Executives for National Security, which was during the Reagan era when priorities of government spending on military versus other things was out of whack. And after that got adjusted, I moved on to other projects. And there was a time when, in my view, the biggest change that I could help happen quickly that would reduce the number of people going to prison and having their lives be traumatized and to a certain extent wasted as a result, was to change the marijuana laws so that people weren't sent to prison over marijuana. And so I worked on that for about 10 years and made a substantial success in Washington State and started looking for new projects to work on. And that's when I started working on this book, which I started thinking about in about 2003.
Super.
All right, and so Dale, on your side, I noticed that you were the founding executive director of Foundation Beyond Belief, a humanist nonprofit that raises funds for charities worldwide, promotes volunteerism, and organizes the humanist response to disaster recovery and international service. How's that going? Because I really would love for the secular movement to have a bigger and more robust impact on first response and helping out in disaster relief and et cetera.
Yeah, it's going very well. I'd love to see it 10 times as big. Essentially, Foundation Beyond Belief is a series of pilot programs for the movement, is what it amounts to. It was founded 7 years ago. I was executive director for the first 5 years. And the idea was unabashedly looking at what people in religious communities, the advantages that they have in terms of engaging in charitable work. Right. And the fact that regular churchgoers give 2 to 3 times as much of their discretionary income to charity. And this is often presented as some sort of a virtue gap, is the way it's often been said. But
right.
As much as anything, it's a structural advantage of going to this place once a week, hearing an inspirational talk, and then a shiny plate passes in front of you. Yeah. There's your opportunity. You're sort of nudged to rise to the highest aspirations of your worldview. And I wanted to provide that same thing for the non-religious. So we set up a membership foundation in which people can donate the amount of their choice in an automatic monthly donation. And we feature 4 charities per quarter in 4 different areas, then pull together the member donations and give grants to these charities. And up to this point, I think we're at $2.4 million in grants that have been given. We've got a volunteer network of 125 volunteer teams around the United States. And as you said, disaster recovery teams that last year started responding to on-the-ground disasters in South Carolina and Louisiana were our first projects. And the 4th program is this International Humanist Service Corps that sends teams to Ghana, where they're working in the witch camps in Ghana and helping to repatriate women who have been kicked out of their communities under witchcraft accusations. So it's a very exciting and rewarding organization, and I'd love to see it grow quickly.
Cool.
Wow.
And what's the website for that org?
That's foundationbeyondbelief.org.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one at a time, Jeff, and then Dale. 100 years from now, will there be any remnant left of man-made religions and mythologies? I mean, as far as people holding to them in a literal way.
Absolutely. They've been with us for 50,000 years, and they'll still be with us another 1,000 years from now.
Okay.
But they will continue to evolve, and along with human culture, and they will get less tied up with facts that are wrong and more tied up with
truth,
values, and humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you?
I agree, every word.
All right. Well, and I think that's part and parcel. I think that's why we're here talking about this, is because it's not only a battle, like the battle to destroy religion. It's going to destroy itself, but in a much more peaceful, slow, and beautiful way. I mean, in a way, this is kind of good news that it's not only is it not up to us to destroy it, it's actually a beautiful thing to just let it happen.
Yep,
Let me put a different spin on it. The old religion will be destroyed, but it'll be replaced by new religion, so we will still have religion.
Yeah.
I take it you guys are exposed to John Shelby Spong.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yes, we invited him to be a contributor to our book.
Yeah. So one of his books, I forget which one it was a big deal in my deconversion, because he did exactly what you just talked about, Bob, when you said, imagine a church where a guy gets up and he, and John Shelby Spong was definitely that for me, because he just unpacked it piece by piece, and he's a theologian. So I mean, and our backgrounds. I mean, Bob's PhD in mass comm and taught at university level for years. Yeah. I was a lifelong evangelical preacher, but I got a master's in theological studies from Vanderbilt Divinity as an atheist after I left, so that I could not only write books or do a podcast with some creds. But I am fascinated by Bob and I both are fascinated. This has been our friendship has been based on this, because we're both fascinated with man's obsession with God, and it sounds like that you guys are, because neither of you were traumatized by faith, like a personal faith that backfired. It sounds like you guys are both intrigued with this, and I mean, is that an accurate statement?
Well, I think that's just the word. Intrigued is actually a really good word. My undergraduate major was in anthropology. Mm-hmm. And sure. I've always sort of approached the idea of religion as an anthropologist, that there's this fascinating expression of what it is to be human, and that and religion is the response to that. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's not a good response. Sometimes it's inhumane. But it is, our condition is pretty strange. We're in an odd position here as mortal beings on a planet that we sort of woke up on and we didn't sign up for. And I think being intrigued by the human response to that is really the right response. Yeah.
Well, Jeff, I'm looking at you're a chemist, you're a lawyer, you seem to have like a lot of the logical side of your brain, and yet, you're really, you're okay with these more abstract things, right?
As long as they are consistent with the scientific way of knowing, sure. It's really what's most important for people. The science should be easy for everyone. The values are what's hard and what's important for them to think about and work on.
Yeah.
Right, sure. How did you meet, you two, Jeff and Dale?
I started working on this particular draft of the book in 2012.
Right.
And after working on it for 3 years, I had it to the point where I was ready to invite others to critique it and participate in some way. Mm-hmm. And I went out looking for people who are interested in this subject and finally found Dale.
Uh-huh.
Wow. That's outstanding for both of you. That's terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really, as just a guy that reads books and is interested in this stuff, this is an excellent book. I've got it on my Kindle. I was just telling Cass, I think this is one I'm going to buy for the library as well, just to have.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. You know what I mean? I mean, I can reference it on my Kindle, but sometimes you just want to grab it and look at things. It's a slight tome. It's only 166 pages, so you can get through it quickly. But it's just jam packed. It's got a little history in it. It's got a little, it's just a well-rounded piece of work, and I enjoyed it. I'm so delighted I'm delighted you guys wanted to come on the show.
So I can't end the show without actually trying to tap the human side of both of these guys. So, what is your drink of choice if you or do you abstain?
As a youth, I enjoyed marijuana. I find I don't enjoy it anymore.
Yeah.
My consumption of alcohol was modest as a youth, and it's a little lower now.
Okay. What about you, Dale?
For me, it's scotch and soda and craft beer.
Oh, yeah. Huge.
Well, I'm a strict gin and tonic guy.
Yes,
myself.
you are.
Oh, I also like a G&T. Yeah.
Exceptional.
Well, thanks for coming on, guys. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. I think it's a beneficial tome for my audience, and the type of people that are trying to go maybe follow Jeff's journey, where you've read Hitchens and you're pissed, and then a couple of years pass, time heals some wounds, and you want to be able to get along with your mom and dad. This might help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So thanks for coming on, guys.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Jeff Haley, Dale McGowan.
Sharing Reality, how to bring secularism and science into an evolving religious world. It is highly recommended. Get the book. Easy to read, lots of good stuff in it.
They're good guys.
And they're decent people.
I enjoyed talking to them, I think.
Yeah, me too. It's that middle ground thing. It's that it's a different way of looking at a many-faceted notion. And I think that's good. It's important.
When you were bringing up the fact that evangelicals have, because they're salespeople, and if you work for Pillsbury or you've got some widget that you're trying to sell. I mean, these capitalism is a driven, thing for the stockholders, and get out there, and if you don't make your sales goals, you're fired.
Yeah,
there's this drive. Well, there's a very similar drive in evangelicalism, because God wants all these souls saved, and if you don't save them, they're not only God, it's going to break God's heart that child didn't end up in heaven, but they're going to be tortured forever. There's all kinds of motivations that are very similar to capitalism. I think that's why Christians and capitalism have kind of always understood each other, because it's a similar neural pathway.
Yeah,
and so get them with pizza, get them with heavy metal music, get them with rap music or whatever. Get them. And when Dale was addressing that, as far as that's the evolution of religion, is that it's using social cues and tropes to get people, not doctrine. I mean, you don't hook these people with
that's true
that Adam and Eve were the first two humans, and that's important that you get that. No, you hook them with the community. It feels good to belong here. People are laughing and singing and eating pizza.
Yeah,
and
sure.
So my point is that he was saying, there is a risk that people are going to get pulled in, and their lives are going to get fucked up by bad doctrine. I mean, this show is all about people whose lives were fucked up by religion, and we're pissed, and we're coming for you, And Dale has a little more generous perspective of that.
Yeah, they both do, I think.
Yeah, saying, you know what, have more confidence in those kids going in there, because you think they're going in there and they're gonna just drink the Kool-Aid right off. And he says the data shows that a lot of them are in there and eating the pizza, but they're not eating the doctrine or drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, right.
And it's an invitation. This book is an invitation to relax. Let evolution run its course on the toxicity.
Social and cultural evolution, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And how we understand that religion Hitchens is right. Religion poisons everything, but that poison is losing its concentrate. Like it's losing its potency because millennials and others are seeing through it.
What Dale called it was a tremendous wave of secularism coming, and he can see it in the data. It's there. It's coming. So, yeah, you're right. Relax and try to get along. I suppose, even though it's hard sometimes. Some of these folks are.
Yeah. Well, sure.
They're pretty tough.
But there's an invitation here for say a secular person like you and I, to talk to our religious friends and be able to say something like this. Yeah, that hurricane that just hit, whatever, Houston or whatever, I'm equally as motivated to help those people as you are without a God or, I don't know. I mean, it's like, I think there's an invitation to try to find common ground. And you may have your religious motivations for being good. I have scientific motivations for being good. I don't know.
Well, just humanist.
Yeah.
I mean, these are people like us for whom the bell tolls.
Yeah.
Tolls for us. Those are us over there. Those are our. That's me. I wouldn't want that to happen to me.
Yeah.
So let's.
But that's a disconnect that's currently out there, and this is why, like, your essay and everybody's essay that has to do with good without God is so confounding for believers. They're still a little befuddled as to what moral basis. So who's the guy that hosts Family Feud? The black. Forget his name, but he's got a famous YouTube, or not a YouTube, but it's on YouTube. But there's a famous video out there in some interview setting that he was in. Just couldn't believe that there were people that didn't believe in God. I mean, it just dumbfounds him.
Steve Harvey. Yes.
He's just like, I don't understand that. I don't understand how you could think there's no God. Look around you,
Right.
And just calling it stupid or blind. To not believe.
And that's funny because I say the same thing. How could you believe in God? Just look around you.
Yeah. and these are the margins.
You see, we have something in common, me and Steve Harvey. But I know what you mean.
No, that's funny that the margins are what you have in common, or at least the perspective of the other's stupidity. And I don't know. I just think that these guys are inviting you and me and Steve Harvey to acknowledge that we both care about people, or we're both grateful. I think gratitude is something that befuddles people because I'm grateful, but I just don't have it. I don't have an object to which I project my gratitude.
Yeah,
I'm just grateful to be alive, grateful that I have 4 lovely children and everything.
That you have a bed at night and food on the table and those kind of things. Yeah, I get that. In fact, they say that gratitude is a marker of adulthood, of growing up finally and understanding. Nobody owes you anything, and you got it, so you should be grateful. That's for sure. Yeah. Interesting. Really, really cool stuff.
Good guys, good talk.
Yeah, great little book too. Again, I recommend it if you care about what I think. But it's good. I enjoyed it.
Let's do it.
Easy to read. Yeah, let's try it again next week. We can fix this. We can figure it out. Thanks, Cass.
You too. So that's our talk with Jeff Haley and Dale McGowan. They're authors of Sharing Reality, How to Bring Secularism and Science to an Evolving Religious World. If you would like to contact them directly, you can reach them by email, jeff@haley.net and dale@dalemcgowan.com. That's jeff@haley, HALEY.net, and dale@dalemcgowan.com. McGowan spelled McGowan. Next week is Thanksgiving, and having been post-theist for several years now, I've grown accustomed to being grateful and expressing gratitude with no object of the preposition to whom credit is due. I'm just grateful. There's no celestial being watching the shop or pulling the strings or levers or engaging in earthly activities. At least that's what life on earth reflects. Everything seems to happen exactly if there was no God or gods, which I find to be a great relief. Trying to please God or get Him to do something through prayer is exhausting. The Scriptures admonish us not to grow weary in doing good, which I think is sound advice in the real world. But I used to apply that to all the hours I spent in prayer each day. Conversely, I sometimes miss my old friend I could talk to and listen to at any hour of the day or night, when I was lonely or confused, and he was powerful and loving. One of the things I'm most grateful for upon leaving Christianity is the opportunity to go ahead and catch up on all the arrested development in my life due to believing in God. I'm now responsible for myself, my mental health, my body, my emotions, my behavior. I'm working my way out of being a person dependent on God and other people. I'm truly alone. Hell, for all I know, you are all just a figment of my imagination or some kind of matrix simulation. None of this may be real. All I really know is my body and my mind, and most of the time, they seem like separate entities to myself. So I too, like most of you, are recovering from religion and putting on my big boy pants and learning how to live my life and be grateful. Ironically, next week we're going to have a pretty heavy show. Former guest of the show, Zoe, her husband committed suicide earlier this year, and we're going to have her on and talk about that experience. I'm also going to have Mark Stevens on, who's a local police officer and friend of mine and former guest of the show. We're going to talk about suicide. But here's the thing about death. You might think that on the weekend of Thanksgiving, why put out a show about death? Well, I'm telling you that your awareness of death, not the compartmentalization of it or the denial of it or sweep it under the rug and pretend it's not happening or could happen at any moment. When we are aware of our own impending death, life becomes more precious, and every waking moment of consciousness is something to be grateful for. So some people might see it strange for me to put out a show about death on Thanksgiving weekend, but I think it's very apropos. Thanks for listening, you guys. I love you. We'll see you next week.